So, Lone Rider here, and I wanted to talk about blind spots. Now, one of the things that I look for in cycling eyewear, such as sunglasses or even glasses that aren't tinted, um, is will I have good peripheral vision? If I go to look over my shoulder, usually I can tell when a car is going to pass by sound. So I don't need to look over my shoulder most of the time. But if I do go to look over my shoulder, will the corner of the glass be in the way? Will it be creating a blind spot? And that ability to see without having a frame there is important. So a lot of my sunglasses that I wear when bicycling, whether it's something like these Oakleys or these more generic riders I wear, a lot of these don't have frames. And even some of the cycling sunglasses I do have that have frames, I make sure it's wide enough down there in terms of the lens and the frame is far enough back that I can, if I look over my shoulder, I can see. And these do have frames, but the lens comes far enough back down there that the frame is not in the way when I look over my shoulder. I consider this to be important, and over the years of riding, it's just something that I instinctively look for and notice. And if you weren't a bicyclist, you wouldn't. This wouldn't even be on your radar as an issue. But I am, so it is. One of the things I consider when purchasing sunglasses is, again, if I go to look over my shoulder, will that frame be in the way? And to me, this is a no-brainer, and I wish all cycling eyewear was made with that as a consideration. Just like I wish all cycling eyewear was, a little better vented and perhaps, more scratch resistant and so on and so forth. Ultimately, you get what you pay for it. Both of these are good sunglasses for cycling. These cost a lot more. You get a lot more for it. It's just, for most people, these will be fine. But, it is what it is. Here's the thing, though. It's not just sunglasses where this is an issue. It's also anything else where there's visibility. And I noticed this today, and I wanted to start off with the example of the cycling eyewear because that's something that I think is very simple and basic, and everybody can understand, even whether you're a bicyclist or not. The whole idea is if you're going to have to look over your shoulder to see if there's a car coming up from behind, you better be able to look over your shoulder without having an obstructed view, right? And I know some people say, well, why don't you just have a mirror, blah, blah, blah. The reality is, again, most of the time you don't even need to look. You can tell by sound when a car is overtaking and time it. And usually, if you've been riding for a few years, you can usually tell what kind of car it is, too. What class of vehicle. Is it a truck? Is it a bus? Is it a car? You know the noises associated with the types of thing. But if there's any doubt, you do have to look over your shoulder. You want to make damn sure you can see, for safety's sake. A mirror isn't really a useful substitute for a direct line of sight. First of all, you have to decide where you want to put it. If it's going to be on your bike, then there's a chance that it's just going to get dinged up whenever you park your bike somewhere. Plus your bike, the more projections you have sticking up off your bike, the less, aesthetically pleasing it is. But also, again, the more likely they're going to get snagged on something, broke, etc. If you have it mounted on your sunglasses or even on your helmet, again, every time you take your helmet off and put it down somewhere, take your sunglasses off, you have this thing sticking out, going to get in the way. It's not just a question of it looks dorky, it's a question of how long will it really last? Under heavy use, day in and day out. It will get broke. And then lastly, of course, is the fact that it's better to have your sight focused on what's in front of you, use your ears to hear what's coming up from behind, and only look back if necessary, than to be constantly trying to divide your sight between front and back. And when you're looking back, looking at this little teeny tiny field of vision in a mirror that's distorted and not even all that accurate anyway. Yeah. Basically, some people like mirrors. I'm not judging them. I'm just saying, from my experience, it does more harm than good. And essentially, it's useless, and you're more likely to it's just something else to break, and it really doesn't give you any advantage over listening and then, when necessary, looking back. The thing is, to be able to do that, you need to have sunglasses that don't obstruct your vision. Common sense. But it's not just cyclists for whom this is an issue, it's car drivers. And I say this because today I noticed something about my car that I had noticed before and I had been unconsciously accommodating for, but I explicitly became aware of it today. I was realizing when I went around turns, or when I was going around a curve in the road, I was craning my head, leaning forward in the seat and craning my head. And I said, why am I doing that? I've been doing this since I got the car like a year ago, and it just now dawned on me why I'm doing it. Because this car has side airbags in the beams on the corner of the windows. What does that mean? The pillars on either side of the windshield are really wide. It's like what happens if you have sunglasses with a really wide frame down here, and the lens doesn't go back far enough. It obstructs your vision when you look over your shoulder on a bike. Well, what happens if you have really wide corners because there's an airbag in there? It obstructs creates a blind spot. And that blind spot is right where somebody's going to be walking off to the side, or there could be somebody on a bike off to the side, or whatever. And so I would note, I would constantly be leaning forward and craning my head every time I came to a curve or a turn or whatever. And I'm like, why am I doing that? I never had to do that in the old car. Well, the old car didn't have side impact airbags, right? Now, I'm not saying that these airbags off to the side are a bad thing. They're probably a good thing. They probably improve safety in the event of a collision. But by making the pillars on either side of the windscreen wide enough to create a blind spot, that with the aspect of perspective, that blind spot of that pillar is big enough to cover a human being standing on the street corner. You will not see them unless you're actually looking around the corner of your windshield, leaning forward and looking around. And I noticed this in other cars as well. Mine happens to be a Subaru station wagon. But if you happen to have another car that has these airbags, or anything else really, built into the pillars on the side of the windshield, on the side of the windscreen, make a note and specifically look to see how much of a blind spot that creates. Because when you come up to a corner, if there's a person standing there and you cannot see them, there could be an accident. Nobody wants to be involved in a collision where somebody gets hurt if they can avoid it. You don't want to be involved in a collision, period. But the point is, especially if you can avoid it. And in this case, you can avoid it by making sure, ideally there wouldn't be a blind spot there. Ideally the car designers would be aware that this is a problem. I find it hard to see that people who agonize over miles per hour and horsepower and gas mileage and wind resistance and how streamlined it is and all of these things and gear ratios, they're agonizing over all of this stuff, and yet they can't avoid putting a huge fracking blind spot right where you're going to have to look every time you're going around a corner. Now, maybe they figure everybody and their brother is going to be on a cell phone, so they're not looking where they're going anyway, so it doesn't matter if there's a huge fracking blind spot. I don't know. All I know is that you'd think that the people designing these cars would exercise the same kind of care that I exercise when choosing which pair of sunglasses to wear while riding my bicycle. Precisely to avoid blind spots, right? Avoidable blind spots. That said, if you've already bought the car, there's really not much you can do about it unless you want to sell your car and get another one. So what I would advise anybody out there to do is look for blind spots, again, in particular where the windshield pillars are, because that blind spot is going to be located right at the edge of the road, which is precisely where there could be a parked car, a kid playing, somebody walking, somebody on a bicycle, somebody waiting to cross the street, etc. And like I said, I had been unconsciously accommodating this by leaning forward and craning my head ever since I got the car. It was only today, because my neck hurt a little bit, that I really noticed I was doing it. And I said to myself, wait a minute. Why am I doing this? Conceptually, what am I trying to accomplish or accommodate that I have to change how I sit in the car and crane my head? Why would I do that in these particular circumstances? And it dawned on me that what I had been unconsciously accommodating was the blind spot created by the poor positioning of the side airbags. And again, I don't have anything against airbags. Presumably, these have a safety benefit, or they wouldn't be putting them there. But where they're putting them, yes, it's great to have a side airbag in the event that you're involved in a collision. However, where they're putting them makes it more likely that you'll be involved in a collision. And alarming alarmingly, for me, for somebody who cares about road safety, not only from the perspective of a driver, but also as a bicyclist and a pedestrian, alarmingly, the type of collision that their positioning makes most likely is a collision with somebody on a bicycle or on foot. The very category of road user who's even more likely to be hurt in a collision. Like, if you ask who is most likely to be injured if they get hit by a car, a person in a car or somebody out there in the open, like on a bike or walking? Well, obviously the person out there in the open. And that's exactly who these endanger the most, because the blind spot they create is right where those people normally are. Or I should say are most often. So yeah, just like I try to take care not to have unnecessary blind spots on my eyewear while riding my bicycle, be aware that there could be blind spots on your car created by supposed safety features. Look for them, try to figure out how to accommodate them. And hey, let's all make a note of this. When we go to the car dealership and we're looking at the car and they're trying to sell us on this, that, or the next thing, point out things that you think might be reasons not to buy that car. And if it's that you have no rear visibility, if it's that you have no side, quarter visibility looking over your shoulder, if it's that you can't see the edge of the windshield because the pillar has a giant airbag in it, point out these things. The only way that they're going to stop including these blind spots and modify the cars to be as safe as they used to be in terms of visibility is if we make it an issue. If we point out that having a backup camera or having a sensor or whatever is no substitute for paying attention and for having a direct line of sight. We have to stress that this is important. And again, whether or not the auto industry changes how they do this, we should make it something that we look for. Just like I look for blind spots on my shades, look for blind spots in your car. Be careful. Lone Rider out. Somebody called my cellular phone.